Hello, and welcome back to the Ladies Wrestling Griot podcast. We are deep into our ECW Women Spotlight, and I kind of feel with this episode, we're getting into maybe like that third phase of women's involvement in ECW, where you kind of had the blueprint of how women want to be used in ECW with women like Woman when she was with Sandman, Missy Hyatt, and then we kind of got into that middle ground where you really started to see people that were made in ECW and they didn't have any experience outside of that company and they didn't make a name for themselves in other places, like Beulah McGillicuddy and Francine. And now we're kind of getting into talks of women like the one we're going to be talking about today, who had some experience outside of ECW, but did not reach a certain phase in their careers where they were well known outside of local shows that they did, but really made a name for themselves in ECW. And also at the time, you start having a mixture of that, but a mixture of women that started to come into ECW after they kind of had some popular stints in other companies and wanted to still be involved in wrestling, or they had followings in other forms of entertainment and came to ECW because they just wanted to explore what it would be like to be in a wrestling company. So this was a very interesting time. Let's say 98, between 98 and the end of ECW's run in 2001 was a very interesting time because there were times where people really just made small stints, still impactful moments, and people that stuck it through from the beginning of what we consider Extreme Championship Wrestling to the time where they closed their doors. So this episode, we are going to go right into Dawn Marie's run in ECW. Now, of course, there are a lot of great moments that happened after Dawn Marie was in ECW, but I really want to focus on her time simply in ECW. And of course, we know that there was a later inception of ECW, but that's not really the focus of this ECW Women's Spotlight. I just want to talk about the original version of ECW, simply because, and I'm one of those people that does agree, I feel like that was the essence of what people liked about ECW, that it was not attached to WWE in a certain way. We know now that Vince McMahon was helping with providing some funds when it was needed for ECW, and even using ECW as a place where he could pluck talent from. But for the most part, ECW was essentially one of the prime examples of an indie company that gained a strong following and had their own culture, their own lingo, their own way of doing pro wrestling. So I really want to stick to women's involvement in ECW for that original ECW run. So let's get into the career of Dawn Marie. Of course, we always have to start off with where the interest came, for someone like Dawn Marie in wrestling. And she has stated before that growing up, she was a fan of pro wrestling. Some of her fondest memories growing up was actually watching MSG wrestling events with her dad and her grandfather. At an early age, Dawn lived on her own, and she put herself through school by working at go-go bars while attending business school, and she also modeled. So while doing that, and many times having appearances that she would do, she was signing posters. And she started having a casual conversation with someone named Jonathan Gold. And she was talking about how much she loved wrestling growing up and how it would be something that she really wanted to do, but she didn't know how that could ever happen, and having inspirations for people like Miss Elizabeth was something that made her think about obviously being involved in a managerial or valet form, not obviously as a wrestler. And while Dawn Marie was just thinking that this was a casual conversation where she's just talking about things that seem like far-fetched dreams, Jonathan Gold was actually taking that conversation seriously. And he had some connections to people in the indie wrestling circuit. And when he saw her again, he actually told her that if you really are serious about wanting to get into the wrestling business, this is opportunity for you, and you should try to make an appearance at this local wrestling show. And I think initially Dawn was taken aback that someone had actually taken her dream seriously and actually went out of his way, to make sure that she can dip her toe into it and see if that was something that she wanted to further explore. And she did, and she made her wrestling debut in 1995. And she spent 4 years working on the Northeast Indie Circuit. In America, she worked for places like Maryland Championship Wrestling. And what she has said from that time was that she really enjoyed learning the old school way with having certain respect, taking the steps that you need to, and really taking in that mentorship that you absolutely need to make it in the business and to understand the mechanics of it. She learned a lot of psychology during that time that she was on the indie circuit prior to being in ECW, and she doesn't take it for granted. And she thinks that that definitely helped her when she was in ECW to really know how to maneuver through the politics that are involved behind the scenes, and that really impressed Paul Heyman later on. And let's be honest, because Dawn was kind of alluding to this, with Paul Heyman being able to easily read people and figure out who he could use and who he couldn't, knowing that Dawn really wasn't going to be that person because she was hip to the game. And also Dawn came from some of the industries where it's very easy for people to think that they can manipulate you, that you're naive. So I think that also gave her a leg up with working go-go bars, modeling, doing all those things where people really try to use and abuse you. I think that for her to navigate through all of those things and then also go to business school and start working in the real estate industry, in the stock industry, she really understood business. So I think that that tapped into why she was able to really have, it seems, a drama-free career and a very chaotic and intense locker room as ECW later on. So as Dawn is making the rounds and really starting to get the lay of the land in the 90s indie wrestling scene, she does get her opportunity to step foot in ECW. And according to Dawn Marie in a 2008 shoot interview, she stated that she got her start in ECW due to Sunny coming to the promotion. And originally, Sunny was supposed to have a feud with Terry Runnels, who was going to also come to ECW. But Terry's contract was renewed in WWE in 1998. I believe Terry kind of took a break on screen, and that was probably going to be the time where Terry went to ECW to have a feud with Sunny, who was sent to ECW because she was having a few problems. I think that maybe they were just going to bring Terry in, let her have a little bit of time there. But I guess certain talks started to happen with Terry and the company, and they just decided to bring Terry back on WWE TV instead of letting her have that stint in ECW. So that left Sunny without someone to compete with, especially someone that Sunny could compete with, that the crowd already saw them, have some interaction on screen. So they had to bring someone in there that was going to work well with Sunny. And in comes Dawn Marie, the opportunity to make a name for herself in the land of extreme. So she received a call in August of 1998 from Bubba Ray Dudley, who at the time was, I guess you could say, he was somewhat of a talent scout at the time too for ECW, a booker, and he handled a lot of business affairs for ECW at the time. And you hear that through many interviews with people who worked in ECW, that Bubba Ray would usually book the talent for the shows and have conversations with them about what they were doing, making sure they were scheduled to make the appearances. So he was very involved in that. And he let Dawn Marie know that that day, that very day that he was calling her, they were going to have a show in Philly, and they wanted to know if she could make it. And a very excited but nervous Dawn Marie made the 2-hour drive from New Jersey to Philly to be there to work. And she was immediately told when she came there that pretty much, as I'm pretty sure Dawn Marie knew, that Sunny, now being named Tammy Lynn Sitch, using her real name in ECW, would pretty much be the star of that feud. And she was simply brought in that night to kind of get into Tammy's face and to really show that she was obviously opposed to her. And at the end of that scuffle that they were going to have, Dawn Marie was going to have her clothes ripped off, and they wanted to know if she was okay with that. And you have to remember, at that time, we were pretty much in the midst of the Attitude Era, but not every company participated in that when they had women involved in storylines. For instance, WCW rarely did it. I don't really even know if there are any prime examples of WCW really having women do that up until, I think, maybe 2000, maybe the last few months of the WCW being open. But before that, you didn't have women being stripped down to the bra and panties. So it wasn't something that usually a lot of them were comfortable with. But as Dawn said, she knew this was her opportunity to get into ECW. So she said yes. And that first appearance, that I think after that, right after that, was turned into 3 weeks of a guarantee, turned into a whole stint in ECW, and the rest is history. And immediately when Dawn was brought in, Paul Heyman loved the chemistry that Dawn Marie and Lance Storm had. And soon after her debut, she would be tied to him. And they really brought, with Dawn Marie, really brought out I think a great persona for Lance, and really helped to frame who he was. I think that Dawn brought in this clumsy, ditzy, goofy at times, I think very comedic, by the way. I don't think she gets like a lot of praise for that, because just like what you saw with Maria Kanellis, you have someone in Dawn Marie that understands how to have like a natural wit. And if you don't know how to do that, you don't have a great time, and you're also not an intelligent woman in real life, you can't really depict that properly. And I think that Dawn Marie did a great job with this, where she was, of course, a very beautiful woman, but she was so smart in the way that she wanted to come off to separate herself from the other women, that she made sure that the beauty didn't take away from like the comedic timing and the almost, and I would say some people might disagree, but almost like the Lucille Ball-esque type of character that she created, where she's all for her guy and she's there to support him, but at the same time, if she can get a moment to wave and get the attention of the crowd and and show off her beautiful robes and get the attention, she's gonna get those moments. But she is all there for her guy, who she loves more than anything. And I really loved that. That was Dawn Marie's angle, to make sure that she was separated from the other women, who were all very beautiful in ECW, but they did not have like that type of comedic timing that Dawn Marie had. And I think that it really rubbed off well with Lance Storm's extremely serious, highly intelligent, and athletic elite character that he portrayed. Those two seemingly different characters, I mean, extremely different characters, work so well together. And I think it's, to me, one of my favorite examples to use about what a manager can bring to the table for a wrestler. I think that Dawn Marie just really framed Lance and made sure that her character didn't take away from what Lance was doing in the ring, because when the bell rung, it was all about showcasing what Lance Storm could do, but she really made it entertaining to see the pair together. So great call for putting Dawn Marie and Lance Storm together. And we see this pairing between Dawn Marie and Lance Storm, and they both have a laser focus to take it to Chris Candido and taunt Tammy Lynn Sitch. And while Chris Candido and Lance Storm are in a deep feud, Tammy and Dawn were brought in to add to the animosity felt by both men, and also to both on their own really frame the men that they were with and add a certain zest to both of those characters. And this feud lasted for several months, and even Dawn Marie being named Tammy Lynn bitch to obviously antagonize and taunt Tammy Lynn Sitch, I thought was absolutely hilarious. And this feud definitely led to Dawn becoming one of the bigger names in the company for the women's division, because coming in, you have to think about it. Dawn Marie coming in, immediately having a feud and rivalry with Tammy Lynn Sitch, who was hot off of her run in WWE, and being able to stand toe to toe and get the same type of reaction from the crowd when she was early in her ECW run. That's a big deal. And I think that definitely put a lot of eyes and really had I put a spotlight on the fact that Dawn Marie was a rising star for female managers in ECW right away. And she had really good chemistry with Sunny. She could keep up with her. She could not take away from Tammy, but really get some good heat and really get a great response from the fans. And that's not always easy. So Dawn was definitely holding her own early into her time in ECW. And I have to say, this has to go the notice cannot be ignored, that there was some great matches between Chris Candido and Lance Storm during this feud. You had a lot of mixed tag matches, and sometimes those you have mixed tag matches, it could take away from showing off what the guys could do in these matches, but it didn't. Everything really worked together smoothly. You can still see, especially Chris and Lance really being at their peak in ECW at this time. It really showcased them well. And having the women involved in these tag matches did not take away from their feud. It was just brilliant, and it's good that we have, especially, I would say, this is why both men had managers. It was good to see that they had the moments where the managers could really bring certain attention to them, but the wrestling from both Chris Candido and Lance Storm was really on display, and the fans really got to see some 5-star matches. And let's be honest, during this time when Lance was feuding with Chris Candido, he also had great matches with Shane Douglas, and honestly, any member of the Triple Threat faction was a must-see match. So this pairing with Dawn Marie and Lance, and seeing Lance have these great matches, just proved that this was a very important pairing between the two, and it led to success. And it was nice to see another great example of a great manager-wrestler combination with Dawn Marie and Lance Storm. And during this time, you can see as Lance and Dawn Marie started having success with their pairing, that Dawn started to feel like she was becoming the head of the women's locker room, and declared that, and she even declared that after she attacked Tammy Lynn Sitch with the help of Miss Congeniality, who later on became Lita, she made it clear that she was going to be the queen of extreme in the company, and she wanted to knock Francine off of that pedestal. And she even had the gusto, after attacking Tammy Lynn Sitch, to call out Francine and challenge her. And that's when you start to see that beginning feud between Dawn Marie and Francine. This is an infamous feud because unlike the chemistry that you saw with Tammy Lynn Sitch and Dawn, where you could just see that obviously this feud was simply professional, but they actually really liked working together. You did not see that necessarily with Dawn Marie and Francine. Even now, this happens all the time. We've heard about it with a lot of men that were high on their runs and they were at their peak, and they would see someone else come in, and they just wanted to make sure that people still realized that they were still there, and that rising star wanted to equally have their share of fame in the company and to let their star immediately rise, continue to rise. So naturally, sometimes that can create a rift, and at the time, a dislike for the other person in real life. Now, it makes for great television because you can really feel that animosity. You certainly saw that between the feud with Francine and Dawn Marie, but it even got to a point where there was a real cat fight between the two of them that stopped being a cat fight and kind of turned into a brawl, but it was quickly taken care of. It didn't turn into something that you would see in other companies where it really just turned into an all-out brawl. It was almost like Dawn Marie was trying to make it clear that she wasn't going to be talked to or handled in a certain way, almost just like, I'm trying to check you, but I'm still going to remain professional and continue on, let the match continue on. But you could tell at that point it got real. Now, everything I'm about to say right now, this is not my words or my opinion. This is from Dawn Marie. She stated that during her time in ECW, from the beginning, she felt that Francine always had a problem with her, and that many times she wouldn't even address her by name. She would call her she or it, and tell other wrestlers to tell Dawn Marie something that they needed to know for a match. And there was just a certain level of disrespect. And for a while, especially because Dawn was new into the company, she would just take it, she would be professional, but there was a point where it became enough. And in Canada, that's where they had that shoot fight in the ring that Dawn initiated because she was making it clear she wasn't going to be talked to or handled in a disrespectful way. So that's what led to that shoot fight. But after that, Dawn Marie and Francine were not in the ring together anymore. And according to Dawn Marie, that was Francine's request, that they would not be in the ring together anymore. So just like I said, as a fan on screen, I loved seeing Francine and Dawn Marie interact and having their feud, especially because of who they were also managing at the time, and made for really great matches. At the time, Dawn Marie and Francine had many times they collided. One was when Francine was managing Shane Douglas, then also when she was managing Tommy Dreamer. So at both stints, I thought that they had great on-screen chemistry, but sometimes you don't always get along with the people you work with, but it still made for good TV, and I enjoyed it. So even though I know these ladies aren't the best friends, I still enjoyed what they brought to the product when they were feuding. And just like I said, this seemed like 98 up into 2001, a lot of new women started to come in. So I thought it was interesting that they were pointing out the fact that Francine had been there for a while. She had made a name for herself, and she was still on top as one of the major managers and female influences in the company. And to have someone that was really making a name for herself as Dawn Marie in the company, I like that they let that tension build to a really great feud between the two of them. So I did enjoy it. So we come into summer 1999, where Lance Storm forms Impact Players with Justin Credible, and Dawn Marie starts to manage both guys, helping them win the ECW Tag Team Championship 2 times. Some notable people that the Impact Players fought were Jerry Lynn, RVD, Shane Douglas, and Tommy Dreamer. And I must say, ECW was very good at putting factions together and having the factions make sense on why they were together, and having people that really had great chemistry together. And Just Incredible and Lance Storm is a prime example of that. One the Impact players were one of the best tag teams that I think that ECW had. Just Incredible just had like this electric energy, and you could like easily like him, you know. And I think that just like with Dawn Marie's energy and personality, it really rubbed well off of Lance Storm. And I think with that male energy that Just Incredible had, it really helped to electrify Lance and make him feel invigorated and continued on with the confidence, and added on to that confidence that he had, that they could really play off each other. And I believe in one interview or promo that Impact players did, Lance Storm was making it clear that many times their strategy when going into a tag team match was to make it clear that they weren't seeing themselves having to beat the other team. They wanted the teams to usually descend and have division before they would even get to the ring, because of the mind games that Impact players were playing. And I just thought it was a really great team. There's so many great matches that came from that pairing. And Dawn Marie's comedic timing whenever they would do promos was just hilarious. And her involvement in those matches was great too. She was always on and there at the right moments. So Impact players is certainly, I think, a highlight in Dawn Marie's time in ECW. So on that high of having the fuse with Tamala and Stitch, with Francine, with the Impact players coming together, in 2000, May 2000, Dawn Marie and Lance Storm stopped working together because Lance Storm decided to go to WCW. Now, we could all wish that Dawn Marie would have gone with Lance to WCW, but honestly, we can't really say that the type of chemistry and the build that they had in ECW would have been replicated in WCW. And at the time, Dawn was offered the opportunity to go to WCW. And Just Incredible said that he was also offered the opportunity to go to WCW. But both Dawn Marie and Justin still had ties to ECW because they were both contractually obligated to stay. But I think with Dawn, and I could be wrong, I think that she agreed to stay for a certain amount of time in ECW. I don't know if there was an official contract, because she said that she talked to Paul Heyman after she was offered the opportunity to go to WCW. And she told Paul that she took being loyal to a company very seriously, and that she would not be leaving because she took that opportunity that ECW gave her to really catapult her career seriously, and she did not want to be disloyal to that. So I don't know necessarily if she had a written contract. I think it was more of understanding that she would stay for a certain amount of years, and if something happened, she could choose to leave, but she did not because she wanted to stay loyal. And it really made a lasting impression on Paul Heyman that she would have that type of loyalty. Dawn Marie was also engaged to Simon Diamond, who was in ECW. So, of course, if she went to WCW, that definitely would have put a strain on the relationship. So it made sense that for Dawn Marie, that just wasn't the right move to make to go to WCW. But as has always been stated in interviews that Dawn Marie has had after that, after her time managing Lance, there was definitely no hard feelings. She certainly understood why this was an important opportunity for Lance, and to this day, they are very close. But that definitely showed on screen, and they had a really, really good run. And it's always best to land at the top at the end of your run rather than to fall down into obscurity and people actually telling you, you know what, you should end this pairing. So at least they had a wonderful, wonderful run in ECW, and they were able to end it off on that note. So yes, Lance goes to WCW, and after Lance went to WCW, Dawn Marie started getting her feet wet with doing color commentary for the ECW pay-per-views and the television show ECW on TNN. It was a new age for for ECW. They were excited about the opportunity to be in TNN. So a lot of people's roles were changing a lot during that time. And I think maybe it could have been why Dawn went into commentary, was to try to figure out what they were going to do with her next, with possibly managing someone, seeing especially with how good Dawn Marie is at talking, that they wanted to see if she could succeed in doing commentary. From what, once again, Dawn Marie said, not my actual knowledge of, but what she has stated in interviews, is that she feels that that time also in commentary was possibly because she was kind of put like in limbo because Lance left. And I don't know how excited Dawn Marie was to be on commentary. I was just say that was a good choice, because Dawn has always really been good at to me, bringing that excitement about an event, and really being able to think on her feet and be very comfortable with doing something like commentary. But she's able to get back into managing on December 2000, when Dawn Marie stepped back into that stage and announced that she was going to sign off with the tag team that was going to, if they won, they would be able to have her managerial skills. And you saw that a lot, you know, in the 2000s, where you'd have a manager that usually was coming back, and they would have a contract, and they would say, well, whoever wins this match will have my talents to be able to help you go to the next level as this rising tag team. You saw that with Terry Runnels in WWE. Actually, yeah, in 2000, when she did that, I cannot remember which pay-per-view it was, but that's when she eventually signed the Hardy Boys to be their manager. And you started seeing that a lot during that time. So Dawn Marie did the same thing. And during that match, you had Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger going against Christian York and Joey Matthews. Now, Christian York and Joey Matthews actually won the match, but she turned on them shortly after, pretending that she was excited to sign them on, and she went with Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger, and that was her way of announcing that she was going to be with the heel tag team of Johnny Swinger and Simon Diamond. And she managed them until ECW closed its doors in April 2001. Now, I feel just like the pairing of Lance Storm and Dawn Marie, I think that this could have been a different chapter for Dawn Marie to be able to really have a great run with Simon Diamond, who was really making a name for himself in ECW and was involved in some of my favorite matches in ECW involving a woman, but I will get to that next week. But I thought that he was really one of the best on the mic at that time in around like 2000 going to 2001. It seemed like he was really starting to get the rep that he was going to be one of the top guys in the company. He just had like a certain charisma. He was very good in the ring, but it was something about like his personality that I think really could took him far if ECW would have continued to remain open, because I think that ECW would have done a good job of framing what he could do. But and I think that Dawn would have been a really good manager for him. I think that she would have had a slightly different angle that she would have gone with how to present herself as a manager. Well, you probably would have seen more of the personality that you got from Dawn Marie in WWE circa 2003. I think that you saw that materialize in ECW when she was managing Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger. But We didn't get to fully see that, but the times that she was managing Simon, I thought that would have been a really great pairing. Obviously, the chemistry was great. It was very natural from the two of them. But no one could have predicted that ECW would close its doors. I think that, like I said, I think it would have been another great managerial run for Dawn Marie if ECW would have kept its doors open. But after ECW closed their doors, you never would have thought that you would have been able to see any ECW originals be able to revisit that time again and that magic that was created in ECW. But WWE acquires ECW and they're able to come out with the rise and fall of ECW DVD. And with WWE seeing the reaction and the high sales for that DVD, it caused the higher ups in the company to take notice and realize that there was still a huge ECW fan base that wanted to see their ECW darlings have one more run. And within the company, wrestlers like Tommy Dreamer and RVD were really pushing for another run, just one more show to at least give ECW a good send off, and they got their wish. And also, some fans who didn't watch ECW in its original inception saw this DVD and became really interested in seeing some of their favorite stars that were in WWE during the Ruthless Aggression era, and they saw how vastly different their characters were in ECW. And that was the case for someone like Dawn Marie. She was able to get a wish that she had when Lance Storm and her were both in WWE at the time, that they could at least have one night they could reunite with the characters that in the pairing that they made up in ECW, and they got that wish when ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view happened in 2005. Lance Storm and Dawn Marie opened up that pay-per-view to a very excited crowd and received a major pop the moment they made their entrance. You could see the sheer joy that Dawn and Lance had for being with each other again. And that was also possibly, in Lance Storm's words, his last match. So it was quite fitting that he would want to face former tag team partner and really good friend of his, Chris Jericho, and to be managed by Dawn Marie in the same night. I mean, you can't really write a better send off for someone than that. And to really have someone that really knew how to showcase him and his own words, and someone that really understood his character and his wrestling style, like Dawn Marie, was really good to see them paired off again. And to put the icing on the cake, not only did Lance Storm and Chris Jericho have a phenomenal match, but Justin Credible interfering to help Lance get the win was pretty cool as well. And obviously it got a huge reaction. And we had a full-on Impact Players reunion at this ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view, and it was just perfect. And I like that because it doesn't always happen for someone to create such a great thing in one promotion and to have that, suddenly taken away. For them to get that storybook ending was just amazing. And it goes to show how much that pairing really resonated with the audience and how they were so excited to see them again. So I think that goes without saying the type of impact that not just Lance Storm, not just Justin Credible, but Dawn Marie had in the ECW was. And for that time in ECW that Dawn Marie came in, where a lot of people were going to other companies or they would do short stints, and sometimes you can fully get a story going on. For her to be able to have a very successful run at that time says a lot, and is something that fans truly remember and loved even to this day. So that is my ECW Women's Spotlight series on Dawn Marie, which is another great episode in the can. I really implore people to look back at these moments in ECW, and not erase, the influence that a lot of women had in the company, and how it was obviously never a perfect time for women with their involvement in companies, but to look at what they tried to do with the limited amount of time, faith in what they could do in the companies, and resources that they had to make those things happen. And they still made memorable moments. So kudos to these ladies that were part of the ECW tapestry. So that is the end of this episode. I am very excited for the episode that will be premiering next week. This ECW Women's Spotlight has become bigger than I thought, with like the moments that I do want to spotlight. So I can't say at the moment when the series would end, but I'm pretty sure I'll probably do 2 more spotlights to just wrap it up. But it has been fun covering this time and covering this promotion. So stay tuned. As I said, I'm looking forward to next week's episode, and I really hope that you enjoy this one, because Dawn Marie, whether it was her time at ECW or WWE, I really enjoyed both runs for what they were. I think Dawn certainly made lemonade out of lemons many times with the opportunities that she was given, and certainly we still remember and love her from both stints that she's had throughout her career. So that says a lot. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you tune in next week. Bye.